think the idea of female space marines just being a possibility, according to one interpretation, is some kind of betrayal. If this discussion has caused you to decide that the woke moralists over at the Templin Institute have finally gone too far, if even now you are furiously hitting the unsubscribe button, well, the tree of any YouTube channel must from time to time be nourished by the blood of misogynists, and as the saying goes, you will not be missed.
What? This video is sponsored by my OnlyFans, where I do my meaningful sex educational content, fitness, health, nutrition, relationship advice, and more. Hi guys, and welcome to Giddy Reviews, or well, welcome to the Empress Show. So guys, we have a very interesting topic here, and it's once again about female space marines, as I did cover this last year, and I think maybe I did that 2 times because there was 2 times that this was brought up. Now we have this Twitter war between the Templin Institute, Major Kill, and I guess a ton of Warhammer 40k fans. So I was reading this. I was reading, what Major Kill said. He was wanting to be a moderator to a debate, but that never happened, never came into fruition because I guess that the Templin Institute didn't want to do it or something like that. You just have to go to Twitter and check, guys, but it's a huge mess. This guy replied to this guy, to that guy. I don't know how many people are in this channel, but definitely one of them, and certainly that one is a guy. He replied in not a very good manner to, well, everyone. He was very confident, and he basically called some people misogynistic if they don't like the notion of female space marines in the Warhammer 40k universe. What basically solves this issue right off, so we don't even have to have a discussion, but still I'm going to react to the Templin Institute video, and we're going to, well, talk about some of his points. But here you go, guys, straight off one of GW's old timers.
Alan Merrett is an old-timer GW alumni. He was there from almost the very beginning and spent many years as the head of GW's intellectual property. He left the company several years ago, but chimed in on Facebook many moons ago, as to what was really going on with the issue in the 1980s. The reason there aren't female space marines has nothing to do with lore, or background or characters of marines. It's to do with simple logistics of making miniatures and selling miniatures. Early Citadel ranges had female versions of most character types. In fact, when we produced the C range, the intention was that upwards of 25% of all the models would be female. But when we started selling the first fully formed C code, which was C01 fighters, retailers kept complaining to us that customers weren't buying the femly models and could we not include any in their restocks. So we took the female models out of circulation. I simply didn't include the molds in the production cycle. It wasn't the only example. And so we pretty much stopped any thoughts of doing massive ranges of female wizards. This was in the early to mid-80s. Citadel customers at that time made it clear to us they weren't interested in buying female models. So when we get to the new Rouge Trader ranges and existing new Space Marine models ranges, it was difficult to see how we could logistically add in an occasional female model to the mix. Blister packs had 3 Marines in them at the time, and the days of huge random mixes were long gone. And we knew if every Marine blister had a female model as one of the 3 Marines that folk would complain. So we didn't make any female ones except for the very occasional ones that pop up from time to time. All the background fluff about why there are only male Marines is there to justify a commercial logistics issue. By the way, the success of the Plastic Marine RTB01 set also played a part. It never occurred to us to make any of those models female, and it certainly wouldn't have been possible to make, so there were 2 or 3 in the box. That set to a large degree defined what Marines were.
So as you can see, guys, it's all about business. And as always, I always stress this out, while fans argue about so many things. GW in this case are having their business and they're interested in what sells. So if female space marines do not sell, they're going to make something in the lore so we don't have actually female space marines and they don't have to produce miniatures. Simple as that, it's the same with anything else. When soccer fans argue about different teams, or let's say you say, oh no, I'm a Messi fan, and somebody says, oh no, I'm a Ronaldo fan. Well, okay, that's good for you, but while you argue, guys, Ronaldo or Messi or maybe both are somewhere soaking in their jacuzzis and enjoying their life and their money and everything that they achieved. Simple people just argue about these things like for no reason at all, totally irrelevant to reality and so on. And it's very similar here and with every other fandom. So whatever GW sells, makes, and includes in the lore, it's all about money, what they think is going to be successful, and when they see that something it is not, like it was back then they're not going to deal with it. And that doesn't mean that they're misogynistic. On the contrary, they wanted to, but it just didn't work. Nowadays, maybe it could work, but they have to come up with a solution out of their butts, out of nowhere, and to somehow drop on everyone the news that for thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years, no one absolutely ever heard about the existence of female space marines. And now Belisarius Cole decided to pull them out of his butt and be like, yeah, I created these because I don't know why, just I did it. That wouldn't make any freaking sense. So let's see his video and then we're going to discuss.
The process of transforming a new recruit into a warrior of the Adeptus Astartes is among the most challenging and complex operations that the Imperium of Mankind is still capable of performing. It remains a dangerous procedure, with many of its underlying principles barely understood, and even an otherwise healthy applicant might suffer from unpredictable mutations or other adverse effects on their physical, mental, or spiritual well-being. According to those familiar with the process, the first requirement of any Space Marine applicant is that they be biologically male. But this has understandably led to the question, why? Why are there no female Space Marines? The official line on the matter is that the process by which Space Marines are created relies inherently on the hormonal and biological makeup of the human male, meaning that only males can be subjected to the transformation. Okay, so there it is. Case closed, right? There are no female Space Marines due to limitations inherent to the process of creating them.
Oh yes, and besides that, of course, we have the trials, and most males will not survive these trials. And they don't. So I don't think that any female could ever survive these trials at all. We know how things are in the army as well. Unfortunately, they somehow have to lower the requirements for female soldiers to get in there. So in some cases that is a thing. And we cannot just delete and forget about the female physiology and the male physiology and say that female and males are equal in their physicality, because we are just not. So as much as I am strong and I'm training and I do all of those things and I'm athletic, if some other guy is doing the same things as I am, he's going to be stronger, faster than me. So I cannot do anything about it, but I can do the best that I can do, and that will serve me, my health, my shape, and everything. So that doesn't diminish the value of female characters in 40k. And we do have Sisters of Battle, Sisters of Silence. We do have the Saints, and they're amazingly powerful. So, okay, continue though.
Well, not really. The most important thing to remember when analyzing the grim darkness of the 42nd millennium, something which sadly many people seem to forget or ignore, is that every bit of information we have, every slice of text, every image, every piece of footage, everything, is coming from a source that can be either biased, misinformed, or outright lying. This universe can never be condensed into a neat and tidy encyclopedia where every bit of data is attributed to some peer-reviewed journal or first-hand account. The history of the Imperium and the galaxy it inhabits is instead a blend of legend, myth, contradictions, deception, and forgery.
Okay, so we do know, guys, we do know that especially in our history when it comes to 30k, everything that this has passed, because currently we do have 40k, we do have ongoing story that is like right now, happening right now. So whatever is happening right now tells us that there are only male space marines, and it also tells us that there was only male space marines, everything that is happening now. That is like that is like the truest representation of history in the making right now. As of events that happened before, yes, some of the things are open to interpretation, some of the things are just lost in time, so not all information is kept safe, but some major events like the Emperor existing, for example, the Unification Wars, the creation of the Thunder Warriors, then the Emperor killed them with the Custodes, the Age of Strife, whatever, all those things did happen. When it comes to all the details about history and all of these major events, that all of these happened? Well, probably not all of these happened. Sometimes, as I found out recently, male characters that were already established as male in the universe were all of a sudden turned into females for some reason, and that to me was surprising. But I guess that could be retconned at some point. But however, major events like the ones that I've mentioned, those things happen, and we do have to rely on some main aspects of the lore to be like, yeah, those things are canon. And we do have to rely on the major stuff at least, so we can say, yeah, this is like the base, and we go from here. And some detailed things from the past, maybe they did not happen as they were described, but most things, they should be counted as canon. That's why I really don't think that something like Horus being killed by the Emperor, and before that Horus killing Sanguinius, will all of a sudden be like deleted and something else would make it there in its place. The point is that obviously stuff happened, and we are seeing the documented consequences of that. What he's saying here just cannot be applied to the reality of the 40k or 30k universe. It can be applied to like minor things, but for the most part, if it's not retconned, it's still still going. And if the author didn't say it like it's up in the air and it's not for certain, then okay, we should take it with a grain of salt. But if it's just written down as it was seen in the way that it happened, then we have no reason to doubt it in any kind of a way.
In the grim darkness of the far future, objective truth does not exist. Anyone who tells you otherwise is probably looking to claim your soul. So if you read the aforementioned quote and decided to accept it at face value, good for you. The Imperium is always in need of easily persuaded, uncritical souls to work as leech harvesters and mind thralls. But for me, the more interesting way to interpret this universe is to never fully trust anything you've been told. So when available sources claim that the process of creating Space Marines is only successful in men, and in almost every instance, artwork and footage depicts the Astartes universally as men, I am inclined to believe
it is in every instance. What are you talking about? Space Marines are only male.
that, yeah, female Space Marines don't seem to exist. But do I take this as unshakable evidence? No. Genetic engineering is one of the few areas of scientific advancement that survived the Age of Strife more or less intact. It is very likely the only field of study in which the Imperium can even approach the marvels and miracles of the Golden Age of humanity. This is precisely why the Emperor used it as the basis of the Thunder Warriors, Custodes, and eventually the Space Marines. The idea that the Imperium's biotechnical divisions were able to create genetically modified warriors who can spit acid and acquire a subject's memories by eating its flesh were somehow thwarted by comparatively minor differences in human hormones, well, I don't buy it. Not
Minor differences in human hormones. Minor what? Let me hear that again.
Genetically modified warriors who can spit acid and acquire a subject's memories by eating its flesh were somehow thwarted by comparatively minor differences in human hormones. Well, I don't buy it.
The differences between male and female hormones is huge. And then, of course, there is the fact that male have thicker bones, more musculature, naturally. We have more fat. So, yeah, unfortunately, there's so many differences, in the bone density, and that makes the overall strength a lot greater in males than in females.
Not completely. I am also aware that imperial organizations work tirelessly to suppress information, and that the decision of what information necessitates suppression often comes down to the archaic and nonsensical opinions of zealots and the insane. And furthermore, it is often very difficult to ascertain what is being deliberately suppressed and what the Imperium has just gotten wrong. The earliest encounters with the Necrons saw them labeled as Chaos Androids, while until recently, it was deemed as incontrovertible that the Squats had been rendered extinct by the Tyranids. Even the Imperium's own history is often misunderstood. There were times when the prevailing narrative was that Horus was not the Emperor's favored Primarch, but rather an especially competent general, and his heresy lasted only 7 days and 7 nights. With all this in mind, my personal interpretation is that female Astartes almost certainly existed during the time of the Great Crusade.
What? But there is no basis for this, And as I said, guys, the fact that someone from GW just said, oh, well, we tried, but we failed, so they're not in the lore, they're not in the figurines. They tried to be born, so to speak, but they just couldn't do it. They tried to create them, they tried to put them there, but they just couldn't do it, so they do not exist.
I think the Emperor, in this progressive era, had fully mastered the creation of the Astartes, regardless of gender. Perhaps...
What? But... Oh, Jesus Christ. This is not about modern day stupid politics. This is not about inclusion of females. If you include females, female space marines, in the lore now, it's going to be purely for the sake of including them, which inherently is going to be wrong, because it's going to be shoved in. Having female space marines is going to be forced in, and that's not good, and just doesn't hold any value or truth.
Even some famous figures from this era were in fact female. But at some point during the history of the Imperium, possibly because of complications with implanting gene seed, but more likely because of some ignorant proclamation by the ecclesiarchy or another imperial institution,
Why would they do that, though? The emperor, the ecclesiarchy, or whoever, they still want to have an effective armies. They still have Sisters of Battle, and they have their own abilities, things that define them, things that do work. You do have the Sisters of Silence, and the things that they do are really amazing and awesome and all those things. Doing this to females just doesn't make any sense. To make females into Space Marines, because we already have the other female warrior types, and as I said, no female would survive the trials. And even I read the comment where somebody said, well, and the Imperium probably needs real mothers, so why would you do this to women? That could be an argument too, so,
The idea of recruiting female Space Marines fell out of favor. Today, if any still remain within the chapters, they are a rarity. Furthermore,
he's just talking out of his ass now. He put female Space Marines in the lore that he just said it doesn't matter anyway because everything could be not true. And then he asserted that there could be and there probably are female Space Marines based on absolutely nothing.
Almost convinced that with the slightest bit of effort, the Space Marine chapters could again accept female recruits. But the Imperium has become so entrenched in religious dogma and ignorance that it's become unable to question and possibly disprove what it considers to be the absolute truth.
Well, 40k never struck me as being misogynist in any kind of a way, and Sisters of Battle and Sisters of Silence are pretty awesome. And I went through a ton by this point of 40k, 30k books. Yeah, nobody has any reason to do what he said. He says that it was done, probably.
The Imperium senselessly wasting 50% of its own available manpower.
Well, like, only such a small portion of men actually survive the trials anyway, so how 50% are wasted? They're basically like 1% of all males, or who knows how much percentage. Okay, maybe not, it's not one exactly, but very small percentage of males can even be a space marine, you know, survive the whole thing and then become space marines, let alone 50% of the whole populace or whatever. That's just not how it is. But thank God, there are countless planets from which, you know, enough space marines could be made.
If you'll pardon the term, because of some ancient misunderstanding, is the kind of tragedy this regime is built on. Now, admittedly, this is just my personal headcanon, or fan fiction if you prefer, and it's based on even less evidence than the conclusion that there are no female space marines.
There are absolutely no evidence, and if his headcanon is a thing according to himself, I mean, if he puts some merit to that, how can you not put merit to the real lore and canon then?
Whatsoever. I'm sure you can poke holes in my opinion just as easily as I did in the official stance of the Imperium. I don't even necessarily think that my stance is the most realistic, it's just what I happen to think is most interesting. That's what I enjoy about this universe. It invites differences of interpretation. But again,
You cannot interpret it. I mean, I did a lot of interpretation myself here on the channel, but some things are just what they are. You cannot interpret them. You know, most of, like I said, the base points of history from the 40k and 30k, the details may be, but not the whole thing.
can't put any more stock into this own interpretation of mine than I would into anyone else's. The universe just doesn't work that way. Is it possible there never were any female space marines? Yes. Is it possible there are female space marines somewhere out there in the galaxy? Yes.
No, because we never heard of them, ever, for the 30 plus years of existence of this universe.
Is it possible there could be an entire chapter consisting only of female space marines? Absolutely.
No. 0 chances.
And is it possible that this all-female chapter is in fact the Ultramarines or the Black Templars or the Space Wolves? There's a lot of evidence to the contrary, and while I can be 99% certain that this isn't true and that Marnius Calgar is indeed a man, the very nature of this universe means it's impossible to...
He was a man. There was a whole comic book about him. He was a man, he was a boy, he went through the trials, he became who he became, and then he became a Primaris later on, and so on. He's a man.
Say with absolute certainty. Even in our own era, there have been times when historical figures commonly believed to have been men were later discovered to have been women, and vice versa.
But not like current figures of the lore, you know, more of the current. That we know that they're a man. Men.
And doesn't this kind of revelation seem like it would fit just perfectly into the age of the Imperium? Sure, a figure like Marnius Calgar is a bit of a stretch. If evidence came out that he was in fact a woman, I probably wouldn't believe that and fall back on my own interpretation, but I mention this only to illustrate the idea that history is not immune to drastic change in light of new evidence. And the history of the Imperium even more so.
Not the whole thing, like I said, not the main points. Those are, I'm pretty sure they will not change. Only like maybe smaller details here and there. Really, if a GW comes out and says, oh, whatever transpired between Horus Sanguinius and the Emperor actually did not transpire this way, I would be extremely surprised. But even that's gonna be such a few and far between change that it's just gonna be like a drop in a bucket compared to everything else that will not change.
Maybe in our current era, being 99% certain about something is enough to arrive at a justifiable conclusion, but the 42nd millennium is a time in which we need to forget the promise of progress and understanding, and the power of science and technology. Within the Imperium, that 99% might as well be 0. And this extends to every aspect of the far future. Did Horus kill Sanguinius before his final confrontation with the Emperor? Maybe. I'd even go so far as to say probably. But if someone told me that during the siege of Terra, Sanguinius fell to the Black Rage, killed Horus, and then tried to kill the Emperor, and this was suppressed by the High Lords of Terra to preserve the honor of one of mankind's greatest heroes, there is nothing I can do to definitively prove that person wrong.
I mean, based on what we now know from the new books, Sanguinius already fought and killed Angra, and he killed that demon that I always forgot his name before that. He was exhausted. He held the Eternity Gate for hours upon hours, and so on. So yeah, if he was at his full strength, maybe, just maybe, he would have had more of a chance against Horus, but considering that he was so extremely exhausted, I think the Horus just killed him. Exactly how it is. That just makes the most sense to me, knowing what we know.
Likewise, nobody can disprove the idea that Space Marine chapters out there might have unlocked or retained the technologies allowing for the successful transformation of female recruits, or that female Space Marines might remain common across the chapters and this has just been suppressed by the Inquisition for whatever reason.
There's no reason.
There are an endless number of explanations as to why female Space Marines might exist, and none of them conflict with the essential nature of the universe. Because the essential nature is fluid, always changing as new information is discovered and old information repressed.
What? That's not... There's a lot more stability and not fluidity, so to speak, constant in the 40k universe overall than changing things. So yeah, even if a female Space Marine could be implanted with the gene seed, she will turn into a man, be though a weaker man, even if that's possible, and she will not, before that she will not survive the trials. So in any case,
The only constant is tone and atmosphere. The details are ultimately secondary to that.
And if you disagree with me, if your interpretation of the grim darkness of the far future is different from mine, well, this will be one of the few times I admit this, but your interpretation is every bit as valid as mine.
nope, because at least most people's interpretations are based on what we all acknowledge as the canon lore. And we all acknowledge that some things could be open to interpretation, and we all acknowledge that some things could be open to interpretation, but not all. Definitely not all, like he says, but it's like the tiny mini bits and pieces here and there.
If you can look honestly at the 42nd millennium and come to the conclusion that
Female Space Marines just don't belong there. Not out of any place of misogyny, but a genuine belief that it just doesn't make sense given what we know, I respect your position. And if tomorrow, some higher authority decreed that there are in fact female Space Marines, 100% full stop, I would, without reservation, defend your right to ignore that decree, and to continue to interpret this universe in whatever way makes it the most interesting to you.
But that is not what happened on Twitter. On Twitter he was like the total opposite of how he behaves here in this video. He was attacking people, telling them how he's gonna prove their point totally wrong, and so on.
But I would ask that you extend this same mindset to me and everyone else, whether I say that female Space Marines exist, or Sanguinius killed Horus, or that the entire universe of the 42nd millennium is actually within a bottle kept by a wizard in Reichland. What I truly love about the grim darkness of the 42nd millennium is that its very nature precludes the possibility of someone, anyone, coming in and telling you what is right, what is wrong, and that there's only one way to experience it. And I'll let you in on a little secret. During one of our investigations into the Imperium of Man, I included a detail that has since become the single most referenced bit of lore on this channel. We receive comments about how cool it is almost daily. The latest one, at time of recording, was left about 80 minutes ago. But that little bit of lore, according to the latest information available, either no longer exists or never did. But I thought it was cool and I included it anyways. Whether or not it's true really isn't important. It's true to me, and that's enough. And given how popular it's become on this channel, I kind of think people agree with me, even if they don't know it.
What is he talking about?
And while I certainly understand and even appreciate having an ironclad history, a firm and uncompromising canon or continuity, if you will, there are also times when it's refreshing to just not deal with that. Wouldn't it have been nice to have the option to say that Rey is not Palpatine's granddaughter, or that the war against the Night King was way cooler than whatever this is, and have those interpretations be totally valid? Now, I am no fool, and I have no doubt that I will have failed to convince most or even any of you, but let's make a deal. If you decide to argue with me in the comments, include the following phrase somewhere in your argument. You will die as your weakling father died. You'll get the satisfaction of tearing me down with a badass line, and I, and everyone else at the very least, will know that you watched this entire video, were open to what I had to say, and that your argument is being made in good faith. Just keep the rest of it civil, my feelings can only be hurt so much. But if you think the idea of female space marines just being a possibility, according to one interpretation, is some kind of betrayal, if this discussion has caused you to decide that the woke moralists over at the Templin Institute have finally gone too far, if even now you are furiously hitting the unsubscribe button, well, the tree of any YouTube channel must from time to time be nourished by the blood of misogynists, and as the saying goes, you will not be missed.
What? I wanna hear this again. The last part, about the misogynist part.
Gone too far. If even now you are furiously hitting the unsubscribe button, well, the tree of any YouTube channel must from time to time be nourished by the blood of misogynists, and as the saying goes...
Okay, I'm not a misogynist. You know, I'm a female. Even though some women actually are, against their own gender. But, I mean, I love female characters. I love both genders. And I try to be objective always, so I don't care whether or not female space marines could be in the universe. I just care about whether that makes sense or not from the business standpoint, which is like the only point that actually matters, because let's face it, they all create things based on what will sell, and nobody cares about our freaking feelings. And then the writers are trying to just make sense out of this. And I think that what they created so far as an explanation why there are no female space marines amongst the male space marines do make a lot of sense. And we cannot just go against biology and say, yeah, women are totally equal to men physically. No, physically, no. Physically, no. Male and females have amazing qualities that basically contribute to each other. That's how it's supposed to work at the end of the day. And we all, in ourselves, have male and female qualities as well. So we are all different as well as individuals. It is not about being sexist or whatever. It's just about having some kind of a common sense, so to speak. But common sense today is actually not very common. So thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. Of course, watch the original video. If you like, come here to my OnlyFans. If you like to connect with me personally, to ask me about a lot of things, and of course I provide a lot of content there, which is my meaningful sex educational content, fitness, health, nutrition, coaching, relationship advice, and more. My own physique updates and my own journey. So guys, I love ya. Thank you so much for being here with me, Gary Reviews. Until next time guys. Bye bye.